Hello, test. Hello, hello, test. Hello. Hello, test. Hello. Hello, test.
Hello? Yes, thank you. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to this panel, Strengthening Legal Tools and Capacity for Climate Justice and Resilience. My name is Dr. Antoinette Nestor, and it's a pleasure for me to introduce you to the chairs of this session. First, we have Professor Marie-Claire Cordonnier-Seger. She's the Executive Secretary at the Climate Law and Governance Initiative and Senior Director at CISDL, and Leverhulme Trust Visiting Professor at the University of Cambridge. And we also have Dr. Cassie Amadul Haq, Senior Director of Friendship. Thank you. Marie-Claire?
Thank you, and good morning. It's a tremendous honor to be chairing this event, together with our partners, Friendship, Fiscalía Medio Ambiente, FIMA, Derecho Ambiental y Recursos Naturales, DAR, and the Center for Human Rights and Climate Change Research, together with all of the collaborators of the Climate Law and Governance Initiative, including Ain Shams University in Cairo, here in Egypt, the IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law, who have been invaluable throughout the years, the International Bar Association, the International Law Association, and the African Union's International Law Commission. I owe special thanks to our expert speakers and also to the Leverhulme Trust, without whose award at the University of Cambridge, this event and our work on the CLGI would not be possible. Further, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to our many collaborators across Climate Law and Governance Day and the series of events that have been led over the last few months leading toward this moment here at the COP, including especially the conference that was co-chaired with Dr. Ahmed Khalifa in Ain Shams University in Cairo 2 weeks ago, bringing together North Africa and Egypt on climate law and law on sustainable development. Especially, I wish to thank and welcome you as our guests, each as leaders in your communities, and our distinguished and knowledgeable climate law and governance specialists who have joined us for these 2 roundtables today, all of whom are renowned experts and leaders in our field. Most importantly, I would like to warmly recognize our graduate student research teams in Cambridge, in Canada, and also in Egypt, whose insights and support have been invaluable. As we conclude with this event, an extremely intense series of COP27 engagements on climate law and governance, your creativity, commitment, and courage inspire us all. And yes, I mean especially Maeve and Antoinette, who are already making arrangements over there. Thank you. This special side event of the COP27 is an invitation to the law. First, we will highlight the opportunity to scale up our local and global responses to the devastating dangers and reality of climate change in light of the Paris Agreement under the UNFCCC regime, especially the numerous pledges, precisions, and promises from COP27, illuminating how law and governance can contribute to climate action, achieving the world's sustainable development goals, and in particular, strengthening legal tools and capacity for climate justice and for resilience, multi-level from local to global. Second, we will issue a further invitation, specially directed to our world-class practitioners, students, and researchers, and others here in the room and in the COP, including many of those who have joined us online with 1,400 colleagues and 420 colleagues for the day and for the specialization course over the last 2 weeks. We hope that you will help us to activate law and governance tools to contribute to creating the future we want. With those words of welcome, I would like to turn to my distinguished co-chair.
Well, good morning and welcome you all again. I will straightway share with you 3 points actually what I feel about the importance of this today's session. What's happening in green zone and what's happening in blue zone. And to make echo with this both zone, we need a bridge, and the bridge is climate tools and capacity. So we need to build this bridge, to make sure all wherever blue or green zone doesn't matter, we pronounce the same words, same things, same thoughts. There are many countries, they have already there are provision and scopes, but due to absence of the proper appropriate tools and the capacity, they can't avail all those provision and scopes. The people those are climate impacted remain like excluded. To include them into the mainstream, we need to strengthen our tools, we need to strengthen capacity. And another point actually, if we remember, everyone in this world now struggling, fighting compensation, contribution, something like this. We should not think about compensation or contribution. We should think about the responsibility. And if we really uphold our responsibility, if we really want to realize our responsibility, if we really take responsibility for what, we need to properly concentrate on law, tools, and capacity. With all 3 words, I would like to listen you more, and we'll speak later more and more. Thank you.
To give us words of welcome, we would like to call upon the president of the Center for Human Rights and Climate Change Research. She's one of our partners from Nigeria and was prevented from taking the airplane in order to come here just a week ago. We're still her partner, and she's welcome among us. We hope very much that the video address she sent can be played and heard here to include her.
Excellencies, co-chair, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, good day. I'm Homoyema Lucia Odiga Emmanuel, a representative of the Center for Human Rights and Climate Change Research. Excellencies, co-chair, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, good day. I'm Homoyema Lucia Odiga Emmanuel, a representative of the Center for Human Rights and Climate Change Research. I welcome you all to this side event on strengthening legal tools and capacity for climate justice and resilience. This side event is hosted by the Center for International Sustainable Development Law, the Center for Human Rights and Climate Change Research, FEMA, DA, and Friendship. Climate change is indeed the central challenge of our century. The science is clear. The only hope of limiting temperature rise to 1.5 degrees is tied to limiting global emission to net zero by 2050. At this point in history, the intercourse between law and science must be strengthened to motivate stronger climate action, reduce vulnerability to climate change, increase climate resilience, and promote climate justice. Justice issues are glaring in the assessment of the burden of climate change, adaptation, loss and damage, warning systems, and means for preparation. Notwithstanding the multiplicity of laws regulating climate change at the international, national, or subnational level, there are gaps in impact which calls for more strategic legal tools and strategies. The world needs more innovative legal strategies to manage climate risk, minimize shocks and stress on the climate, and promote acceptable threshold for greenhouse gas emission. Accountable, participatory, inclusive, faster, and bolder climate action is dependent on effective legal and governance strategy. Today, history records our opportunity to create the change the world needs by identifying effective and innovative legal strategies. As we discuss in our roundtables and interactive sections, let's see and use this opportunity as a trust we must use ethically as stewards and for which we are accountable to generations. Thank you.
Professor Omoyemen, thank you so much for your address. I know you are listening online, and I want to confirm and especially recognize the efforts that you made to join here, the injustice that prevents you from being with us, and the importance of the messages that you've conveyed, which guide us in our deliberations. Thank you. I'm now very pleased to introduce Mr. Mark Elvinger, who is co-chair of Friendship International. And he's joining our roundtable to start us off with 3 innovations in 3 minutes in order to build legal tools and capacity for climate justice. Mark.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Actually, it might have been kind of a homemade misconception to expect me to provide input on innovation in matters of international law, which mainly understood as public international law, when I'm actually a lawyer in private practice with a strong litigation focus and a lot of work in civil liability law. But I think there's a way to bridge the gap, because my main idea or proposal would be that international law, in particular in the on the subject of loss and damage, would be extremely well advised to get much more informed and inspired by principles of private law, in particular in matters of liability. Because you see that the evolution of private liability law has been very strongly in the sense of always better and more easy protection of the victims. And I think that can inspire public law, should inspire the public debate very much. From there, that's my general idea or proposal. That would lead me to my second proposal, which will actually be which is a subsection of this. One of the very difficult subjects when we speak about the loss and damage discussion and liability for climate change losses is the fact that we have always to do with multiple actors who are responsible for the losses which are coming into existence. And I see that in private liability law, this issue has been solved in most jurisdictions by the idea of a joint and several liability, which means that all actors which contribute to a certain loss bear the full liability. So I think the transmission of that concept into the present debate on loss and damage would be extremely useful. The same is about another subject which is a very difficult one in the loss and damage discussion, which is the discussion of causation. Because it's always what is actually, which incidences which cause loss and damage are actually directly induced by climate change. Well, there also civil law has actually found its way by the idea of the loss of a chance, which doesn't then require full proof of liability. I think that concept as well should be transmitted in our discussion here.
Wonderful. 3 extremely strong ideas in 3 minutes on international private law contributions as international legal innovations. Christina, of course, requires no real introduction. She's well known in our circles. But as chair of the IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law, as co-chair of the Paris Agreement on Implementation and Compliance Committee, the Pact, and as a professor of public international law in the University of Oslo, as well as a cherished legal fellow of our centre, I think she can probably complement your ideas with 3 public law, international law innovations.
Thank you so much, Marie-Claire. Thank you for your kind words of introduction and for having me here today. Thanks to CISDL, and on behalf of the IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law, I would like to express a very good morning to all of you here, and thank you for being with us. 3 thoughts in 3 minutes is a challenge, but I'll try. Well, we all know that the goals, and there are 3 goals of the Paris Agreement, the temperature goal, the adaptation goal, and the goal to make finance consistent with low greenhouse gas emission and climate resilient development will not be met with business as usual. We need a transformation, we need a transition of all sectors and systems, and that includes, of course, also the legal system. And I really enjoyed your reflections about the private law aspect to it. Now, when it comes to public or regional international law, let me give you 3 ideas that may deserve maybe a little bit more reflection over time. The first one is the need to regulate entire value chains, supply and demand, and not just the production per se. You may know that, for example, within the European Union, there is currently a proposal on a EU corporate due diligence directive, which is supposed to address private actors' activities throughout the entire value chain, no matter where these activities are happening. It can be extraterritorial, can be a different country, can be a different part of the world. Now, these due diligence obligations include human rights, but also environmental obligations of corporate actors. They do not include, however, yet greenhouse gas emissions, neither removals nor emissions. And that is something we should maybe as lawyers keep an eye on, that also scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions are included in corporate liability from now on. First point. Second point, we also know that the temperature goal, net zero or negative net emissions, will not be met without capitalizing on the potential of removals that lie in nature-based solutions. Nature can provide important contributions to the challenge of climate change, as well, of course, biodiversity benefits on their own. Now, it is important to provide robust standards, definitions, safeguards for nature-based solutions. They also contain the danger of negative side effects, perverse incentives, and therefore the law plays a very important role in getting nature-based solutions right. We have learned a lot from RED Plus in terms of how to operationalize safeguards. If we expand to other nature-based solutions than forests, we need to learn and we need to deploy legal developments. And finally, here, one more point. The World Commission on Environmental Law has a climate law specialist group, currently chaired by Fabiano de Andrade, who sits here, and he will speak more to it. But this is where we carry out significant legal work with regard to, amongst other things, regulating nature-based solutions. And the third point is moving on from net zero. You might find this a little bit confusing because everyone is currently talking about net zero around 2050, and that's important, but that's not where the carbon trajectory stops. Once we have crossed the line of net zero, it has to go down to net negative. This is very clearly expressed in the IPCC report. Now, net negative sounds negative, but that's where we need to go. And we don't really have the legal tools yet for a net negative economy or development or social structure, where we have to remove more CO2 out of the atmosphere than what is being emitted, requires, of course, nature-based solutions, but it may also put on the table technical solutions, carbon capture and storage, and solar radiation management. I'm not promoting this, I'm just saying this is on the horizon. The London Protocol under the London Convention recently promoted 4 geoengineering technologies, which again will need very careful examination, especially from the legal side of what kind of safeguards are needed to both promote climate solutions but also protect the environment, in a particular case, the ocean environment. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. 3 very substantive ideas, and you finally explained in a clear way to us all why it's nature-based solutions and not just forests. It makes so much more sense now. Thank you. I will now turn to my co-chair, who will introduce the 2 national sets of innovations in 3 ideas and 3 minutes.
Session is warming up. Now I request Dr. Fabiano de Andrade Crocia, Chair, Climate Change Law Specialist Group, IOCN WCEL, and Lead Counsel of CISDL. Dr. Fabiano.
Put this here. Welcome and good morning, everyone. Going straight to my point, you're all climate lawyers now, whether you want it or not. With this quote from John Kerry, I want to take a slightly different approach and focus on the need for and the power of legal education and capacity building on climate change. We know that climate change touches upon all sectors of law. Lawyers across the legal profession have a vital role. Law firms and societies face increasing scrutiny, and therefore there's a great need for climate education, which becomes crucial. And I mean both on what climate change is per se, on what specific climate law is international and national, and also how climate change intersects with the different legal areas the lawyers, judges, and academics work on, from corporate to agricultural law to international law. The examples I'd like to share are related to the power of networks for legal education. And I'll mention 2. One is the Climate Change Law Specialist Group that works under as Christina mentioned, the World Commission on Environmental Law, which I am honored to co-chair with Professor Francesco Sindico. We have first and foremost created a global network of climate lawyers, which currently has more than 500 members, and I invite you all to learn more about and get engaged. Please do come to me if you'd like more information after this panel. We are working on issues such as, for instance, understanding the enabling legal frameworks for nature-based solutions to be able to be scaled up and deployed by countries. So really examining how the safeguards and standards are related to legal issues, what areas of law come to play, from human rights to land law to contract law. It's really a broad range. But as I'm asked to also focus on the national level, I'd like to focus on a network that I am part of in Brazil, my home country, called La Clima. It is the first network of climate legal experts dedicated to study, develop, and share knowledge about climate change law in Brazil and in Latin America. It was created in 2019 and quickly grew and expanded to currently having 750 members spread across 26 of the 27 Brazilian states, including private practice lawyers, corporate legal counsels, students, professors, and judges. It works on 4 main areas: capacity building, which I also coordinate, and we really took advantage of the virtual wave started with the pandemic in 2020 and did a first legal education course on climate change in Brazil, which really blew our minds as we had 500 people registering, really keen to learn more, and really showed us the need for more of that kind of work. So we've been doing more courses and are aiming to expand and provide more tools for lawyers to be more capacitated in this area. Then second area is research and development. La Clima has created several working groups that work on things such as developing technical notes, providing inputs to public consultations, such as, for instance, the review of the national policy on climate change that was organized by the Senate in 2021. The third area is awareness raising. We have created what is called the Observatory of the Paris Agreement, an online hub for permanent monitoring of the negotiations and to sharing knowledge about that with the legal, national legal lawyers that do not necessarily follow these processes internationally. And last but not least, it's advocacy. We are here with an unofficial delegation, a COP, until it becomes organized as an actual legal association. And all of this really grew organically from a lot of dedication of our membership, which just really shows the immense interest and need for this. So what I wanted to share as main message and takeaways is that there is immense power in this kind of network and platform. And some key aspects, in my view, so that it can be replicated in other places include harnessing the power of social media, which is really making it easy for people to connect and engage, start small but be ambitious, and provide a framework for people to come together and opportunities for tangible and concrete collaborations that add value but also build on what people know and do. Thank you very much.
Yes, okay. Yes, Dr. Fabiano. Yes, education should be our key, and the network should be our way forward. And true, around 750 members in your network at this moment. So it's a big movement. I'm sure that the networks across the world, we can be connected, to the big buzz in the world. And now it's turn for, let me listen. Dr. Ahmed Khalifa, he is assistant professor in Shams University Law, Egypt.
Yes. Thank you so much, Madam the President. It's a great honor to be here, and it was a great honor for us to work with the CLGI in organizing the Specialization Day and the Climate Law and Governance Day, and being here to speak about strengthening legal tools and capacity for climate justice and resilience. In fact, acting for climate justice needs people who are aware of the issue, aware of the problem, aware of the importance and the danger of the issue. And universities have a great role to play in this regard. So I will split my 3 minutes in a different way than 3 ideas in 3 minutes in 3 sections. First, observation, action plan, and then hope. The observation that got to my knowledge over the last year working with the colleagues is that the offerings on climate law, on environmental law, maybe they exist worldwide, but they are almost non-existent in the Arab world. So climate law specifically doesn't exist as a course or as a component of a course in any Arab universities as far as our research. So this observation led to having my second part, which is the action plan that we tried to work on with our colleagues, and we do really hope to achieve in the next couple of years. The action plan is split into 3 headings, actually, and here are the 3 ideas. As universities, our main role is education, learning. So the 3 ideas would be: 1, tackling the standard learning process; the second tackles the experiential learning process; and the third, the professional learning. The standard learning, as Marie-Claire maybe mentioned in our pre-conference that we organized with our colleagues 5th and 6th of November, we had 12 out of 15 deans of the Egyptian law schools present in our conference, and there was an informal agreement that we will do our best. In Ain Shams, we are offering a new course for masters on environmental and climate law starting from next September. That's a traditional course, readings, exam, and experiential learning. We are intending to have first a legal clinic working on formulating a climate law act for Egypt to be delivered by the summer, and a moot court, hopefully, with the Islamic World Organization on education and culture and scientific activities during the next COP. A moot court for Arab law schools. The third heading, the third idea, is the professional learning. We have a center in Ain Shams Law School where we offer professional trainings in different areas. So we hopefully will open the specialization course in Arabic for diplomats in coordination with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and for judges with the Ministry of Justice, and discussions are ongoing now with these 2 national entities. Finally, the third part of my talk is the hope. We hope that we achieve all this before the COP28, but if we don't get to achieve all of these before COP28, we'll be working on this, and mainly our main target is to be the factor that will initiate a wave of drawing the attention to education among the Arab law schools, because I think the problem it's a fact that the problem affects us all, and the language barrier should not be a barrier to stop any of us to contribute to its solution. Sorry, I took 3 minutes and 50 seconds.
Thank you. We were discussing, before the session, about how really we can make sure the languages we need to convey our message can equip and can, accommodate within our day-to-day life. And that's why in the Arab world, as he mentioned, it's a big challenge, so that they are going to introduce a different type of courses, and so that different activist people, those who are really in action, they can be part of the whole thing. And I believe definitely that we also need to extend our horizon, to learn the language of movement, actions, voice, and so that we can make sure our voice to be heard. And I will back to our co-chair, Marie-Claire.
Thank you very, very much, and thank you to Dr. Faviano and Dr. Ahmed for their excellent ideas, which I think we will all be taking as inspiration going forward, both on education and network building, which builds capacity, and also on legal tools. I'd now like to invite Omoyemen to give us 2 more minutes for ideas of national climate justice legal innovations, and then Ms. Linda Yvette Peña from the Organización Regional AIDESEP Ucayali, Orau, to give us 2 ideas in 2 minutes of local legal innovations. Omoyemen. Fingers crossed.
Good day, everyone. My mandate is to talk on national legal innovations on tools and capacity for climate justice and climate resilience. It's been recognized that environmental laws, including those regulating climate change at the national level, is challenged by lack of comprehensive national legislation, problem of proof and enforcement, issues with compliance, and issues of being able to seek effective remedies. There are several innovations and strategies being used at the national level to promote climate justice and resilience. The first I would like to mention is development of new legal and regulatory framework and review of existing legal and regulatory framework. For instance, in 2021, Nigeria enacted the Climate Change Act, aimed at providing a framework to achieve low greenhouse gas emission and implement Nigeria's commitment to net zero emission. In 2021 also, the United States Environmental Protection Agency released legal tools to advance environmental justice. In addition to those standalone legal tools, there are also another strategy being used is integration and mainstreaming of climate justice issues into existing legal framework. The implication of strengthened legal and regulatory framework is that climate justice will no longer depend on judicial activity by judge, which sort of was objectively subjective. Another aspect of innovativeness has been the result of climate litigation using a human rights lens. Examples are cases like Legari and Pakistan, Jonah and SPDC, a Center for Oil Pollution Watch, and NNPC. Also in early 2018, New York City took 5 of the world's largest oil companies to court for billions of dollars and sought compensation for effects of climate change. In another landmark case in Australia, a pension provider was sued by a fund member for investing in fossil fuels, which was categorized as an increasingly very risky venture. This case was settled in early November 2020, with the pension fund pledging to...
Thank you, Omo Yemen, and we apologize that there was a brief pause right when the dog was also barking, but we could hear your main message and the 2 ideas that you were able to convey. And both of them are very, very important as tools, particularly the rights-based approach, which when dealing with climate resilience, when dealing with adaptation and disaster risk response, is beyond crucial. Our final speaker in this roundtable, and then we'll bring in the second roundtable for the rest of the event, is Ms. Linda Yvette Peña, una representante indígena que se ha juntado con nosotros gracias a nuestra pareja DAR. Yvette, 2 ideas en 2 minutos y después Felipe va a traducir. Ok.
Muy buenos días. Agradezco la oportunidad de poder representar la voz de los pueblos indígenas en este espacio y también que sea de nosotros mismos las propuestas que hagamos llegar para implementación de la justicia climática en nuestros países. Ya, de hecho, para implementar la justicia climática es necesario que el Estado se preocupe en garantizar herramientas para la protección de los derechos humanos en el marco de la actual crisis climática que hoy el planeta entero, el planeta entero en su totalidad enfrentamos. 1. Para reconocer cuáles son los grupos más vulnerables a estas afectaciones, en Perú se ha creado un decreto supremo del Ministerio de Justicia, un mecanismo intersectorial para la protección de personas defensoras de derechos humanos. La aprobación de este mecanismo responde al actual contexto de incremento de amenazas a defensores y defensoras de los derechos de los pueblos indígenas y del cambio climático.
I will be translating from this first part. She's very thankful for being here representing indigenous people. She's from Peru. She's going to tell us a little, 2 ideas that are working locally to protect indigenous people. They are told us about a supreme decree that intends to protect indigenous people regarding the protection of the human rights that was for what organism? ¿Por qué organismo lo dicta?
Ahora, el decreto supremo del Estado peruano, del Ministerio de Ambiente.
It was for the environmental ministry
De
of Peru.
De justicia de...
Continue.
Ok. La aprobación de esta herramienta y de normas en general no es suficiente. Debe haber esfuerzos reales y tangibles de los estados para la implementación efectiva de estas herramientas ante la emergencia que afecta actualmente a las personas defensores y defensores de los territorios.
So even this supreme decree that was approved, this is not sufficient if this has an expression on the territory, a tangible expression of the territory, and an expression that is tangible for the people who lives there in their language and in their context, and that's something that we should be looking when we're implementing legal tools and laws that intends to protect specifically indigenous people.
Finalmente, para finalizar, la justicia climática, para implementar la justicia climática, los países desarrollados deben asumir su responsabilidad como principales responsables generadores del cambio climático. Es urgente demandarles transformaciones ecológicas profundas que aborden el problema de los combustibles fósiles, que es responsable del 80% de los GEI a nivel global. Pero también es necesario que los países desarrollados cumplan con asegurar financiamiento climático a los países en vías de desarrollo, que en contraposición son los menos que aportan al cambio climático, pero los más vulnerables a los impactos del mismo. El financiamiento debe ser justo, equitativo, y las naciones deben garantizar que el financiamiento llegue a los territorios y apoyen las principales demandas más vulnerables, como son los pueblos indígenas, los verdaderos guardianes de la Amazonía, porque nosotros de ello depende, que si no hay bosque, no hay vida, si no hay bosque, no hay oxígeno, por más que haya economía, si no hay bosque, no hay naturaleza, no hablamos de nada. Estamos nosotros con nuestras acciones condenando al exterminio de la naturaleza y de la población mundial. Muchas gracias.
So, I will translate. In addition to the laws that we need to have laws to specifically protect indigenous people and an expression of or in a legal framework, it is also necessary to be aware of the level of implementation and of the perception of the implementation of these laws for indigenous people. But in a global level, we also need to advance in the an acknowledgement of responsibility of some countries between others. That responsibility should express in finance, and that finance should be equitable and should be with a fair process to the distribution. The indigenous peoples are the current guardians of the ecosystems that are more relevant to the fight of the climate change. They are saving, they are protecting the forest, they are protecting the rivers, and they now know they have that role specifically for addressing climate change. So we don't need just laws, we need also an echo of responsibility and finance in these worldwide institutions. So he's very thankful for sharing his ideas with you, and she will keep your message in these spaces of the indigenous peoples of the Peru. Thank you.
We would especially like to thank Yvette and also Felipe from FEMA for his help. It is true South-South cooperation, and we would like to especially thank Yvette's organization and network and people for being here with their such important voice. Thank you. We're going to invite the second roundtable to come up right away. So Kazi and I would like to thank all of the innovators and experts and practitioners and leaders who have given such an excellent tour de table of the ideas and the innovations that were presented in Climate Law and Governance Initiative. They're going to sneak away. And the second roundtable on governance and transparency innovations for climate resilience, disaster risk and adaptation will come up with Ezio joining us beside us from FEMA as a co-chair. And I would like to invite in particular Ms. Runa Khan And also to represent Hafizul Islam Khan, I would like to invite Mumita Gupta. And I would also like to ask to step in for an emergency change from Dr. Amagwe Francis, who is unable to join us, if possibly Advocate Eric Kasongo might join us up here to speak to us from CODED from the DR Congo. Finally, from the chairman of the Bayelsa State Ecosystem Restoration Committee, Dr. Hepzibah Suwodo, if he could come and join us up here as well. And it will be a similar round table. Thank you. With 3 ideas in 3 minutes from each of our speakers. And then Ezio Costa Cordello, the executive director of FEMA, has agreed to take questions for 20 minutes so that you can also engage with us. And the speakers from the first panel, those who could stay, are right down on the first row, and we'll ask them to come back up so they can answer your questions at that time. So, without further ado, it is a joy to introduce a beautiful, distinguished, intelligent, gentle and kind leader from Friendship, the founder and executive director who, en plus de tout ça, happens to have wonderful taste in colors. At least I believe so, yeah? And so Ms. Runa Khan, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So, climate justice, resilience, transparency, innovation. It all goes together because my first point would be that ensuring transparency is the very key in dealing with anything, any lives we touch, any community we work with, from anywhere that we come. Responsibility of the givers of any ideas to money, to even be it on the field, if you are helping them in developing, it is the responsibility of the giver to do it in a way in which the responsibility of the receiver and the giver is both equal. And transparency cannot, in any giving, be the limiting factor, but the very essence of the way that we work with the communities and the people. That was my first, because though it is a very soft, what one would say soft skill, I would say it is the very essence on which and how we have to work. Secondly, a very simple example of the way that we work with innovation. Transparency needs to be understood deeply. What is transparency to those people who are below the line, which is below the poverty line, let's say? Be they climate migrants, be they refugees, or be they just the ultra poor. Bringing awareness of their socio-economic political ecosystem, and so this was what we need to ensure that they understand in full depth, because only then can they reach out and demand. Creating manuals by which the people themselves understand how they are going to elect their own members, what happens in policies, in things like social issues, hidden social issues which they have got. We create paralegal aids from the community and paralegal booths so that there is a rejuvenation and continuous service giving of legal services to the communities. Thirdly, this is not enough, because just by giving services to the community and not linking them up with the governmental ecosystem you're not completing the whole course. Therefore, we link them up with the government services in a way where we have legal booths in the judge courts, and people from the community do not have to go through the money-making middlemen or lawyers who take far too much, out of these poor people, and therefore the communities can come directly to those who are members of their community and in trust and responsibility tell them, and these are taken directly to the judge courts for services of the government. So much so that the judges and the lawyers can come to the paralegal booths which are in the judge courts and directly work to ensure that there is transparency of justice, which is what we are aiming for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You were clear, you were inspiring, and you were also giving 3 extremely concrete ideas for transparency. I would like to especially thank also Advocate Eric Kasongo, who has kindly stepped in at the last minute for a speaker who could not come, but has agreed to share 3 ideas from his work on the ground in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where he is a lawyer fighting to defend forest dwellers and others. He is executive director of CODED, a Foundation for Environment and Development in Kinshasa, and he's also, we're very proud to say, a research fellow of the Center for International Sustainable Development Law. Eric, the DRC is not one of the places that we always look toward for transparency, but do you have any innovations you can share that work?
Yeah, thank you very much, Marie-Claire. Thank you for the opportunity for giving the floor for this special session. And I think on the issue of transparency, as many says here, more is to be done. And the first idea that I can share as a legal innovation is to help institution to better domesticate all international instruments that are adopted in the global level. Because one of the weaknesses that we experience is the fact that many recommendations coming from different meeting, different conference resolution are not well domesticated in the internal legal system, because those are many transversal cross-sectoral issue where there is not enough sharing between local institutions that handle on the ground the implementation of those regulations. So the first thing for me is to make sure that we domesticate all the recommendations and resolutions that are taken in the global level. The other thing is also to make it possible for many judges and all people that intervene in the landscape of the judicial system to be able to handle all those questions, especially when it's come to tackle issue on the climate change. One of the main weaknesses is the fact that many of the legal representatives, in the judicial system, are not aware on what is going on. And also the judicial system is very traditional, relying on the ancient system instead of improving system, making this system follow the trend that at international level. It means that we need to make sure that we have environmental courts that address clearly climate solution. And the last thing I can say is about describing legally at the domestic level what we can consider as damage, because nowadays we have a definition of loss and the damage which is global, but is not specific for each of the country. I mean, many countries faces climate change challenges, but it's like there is many difference when it's come to follow on the constraint and challenge that some community are facing. So within the domestic level, it's also important to set up a specific rule how to well describe damage at the local level. I think that a few, Madam Chair, I can share with you today.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And these are innovations that I know you are leading in your country, domesticating the law so that it's relevant, making sure that these changes are made with the environmental courts and in the courts, and also the others. So thank you again also for the work you do. I will now turn to our third speaker here with us in the room, Mumita Dasgupta, who is from the Center for Climate Justice of Bangladesh. Hafiz has had to go and chair a press conference about loss and damage, and we will shortly learn exactly what it was that he was announcing. But in that moment, I would like to ask Mumita to share Hafiz's 3 ideas in 3 minutes and thank her again for being willing to convey them.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. In matter of governance and transparency innovations for climate resilience, disaster risk and adaptation. This is a discussion on governance innovations. Yes. So about governance innovations, as we know that Warsaw International Mechanisms is established in 2013 at international level, and for policy arms of this Warsaw International Mechanism, Executive Committee is established on 2014, and in 2019, Santiago Network on Loss and Damage is established as an implementation arm. And for financing this implementation arm, finance facilities is under discussion, and it is now in the agenda. It is an agenda item, and it is still in discussion. It is not yet established fully. So it is the international part. From national part, Bangladesh is thinking about establishing a national loss and damage mechanism. So it will be a reflection of the international part. So at national level, for national loss and damage mechanism, Ministry of Law will be working as a policy arm. Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change will be working as an implementing arm. And for financing, Ministry of Finance will be working as a financing arm. So this will work together for facilitating the loss and damage matters. And this mechanism will be established from national level to local level. If you know that Bangladesh has a standing order on disaster, it was on 2010 and it was renewed on 2019. It has already established governance system from national level to local level with collaboration of government, NGOs, CSOs, and everyone involved. Every person's relevant with that. So that similar mechanism can work in this for work on this matter also. So local level can collaborate with national level, and national level can collaborate with international level. So international level can say that this is what you can do, and this is what available, and national level can do the same to the local level, and local level can say about their needs, that these are needs and these are our capacities, these are the gaps, and that national level can convey to the international level. That's the mechanism I can say from my senior. And that's all. He was very sorry to leave this, and thank you for this.
Thank you very, very much. First, for an excellent explanation of something which I think is about to be perhaps announced, but also for underlining the same idea that Eric has been bringing forward in terms of transparency and governance, the need for these compensation and claims mechanisms, the need for these mechanisms that exist on loss and damage at the local and national level to interface internationally. Thank you very, very much. So I'm going to turn to my co-chair to chair the last speaker of this round table, and then we come to our favorite part, which is the chance for questions and exchange with all of you.
Now let's listen at different dimension, the policy innovation. And Dr. Hafiz Abad Sobo, he is from the Niger Delta, and at the same time chair for Balsha State Ecosystem Restoration Committee. Dr. Sobo.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be part of this discussion. Like I was introduced, I'm the chairman of the Bayelsa State Ecosystem Restoration Committee. Bayelsa State is a sub-state in Nigeria. We're made up of 36 states. It's a coastal state and a state that is driven by fossil fuel for over 60 years. Bayelsa State is the first state in Nigeria where crude oil was discovered, and ever since in 1958 by SPDC, it has been running Nigeria's economy. So when they talk about climate change and the impact of fossil fuel came up, I took the opportunity to participate at the United Nations 2019 General Assembly Climate Action Summit. It inspired me. When I came back home, I shared the report and my experience at that Climate Action Summit and told the Bayelsa State government there is need for a new policy direction because our state bears the brunt of climate change while Nigeria benefits from the profit of crude oil. And I think my advice was taken seriously. Sometime in 2021, the World Environment Day, the governor of the state made a robust declaration, and that the state will now work with climate change advocates, policy and research experts to be able to drive the state towards a new direction in environmental governance and to change the existing laws and come up with new laws. And a committee was set up, and I was also glad to inform the House that Lucia Moyemen became the secretary of the committee, and while I became the chairman of that committee, and we try to pull our expertise together to ensure we come up with a blueprint to enable the state to navigate in this climate change turbulence from now till 2030. And that's our mandate. So I'm here to inform you that policy innovation is key in achieving climate action. And as you know, we are at the mercy of nature-based violence. Recently, the state is ravaged by flood, perennial flooding. The last flood was in 2012, and we have another flood going on right now. It's about 3 weeks now. Two-thirds of the state is underwater. So the reality of climate change, you don't need anybody to tell you that this climate change is here. And so the government is ensuring that they participate and also send delegates to monitor global climate change policy negotiations going on right now. This is the second side event they've held, the one in 2012, 2021 in Glasgow, and they also held another one here just to get the information and the tools to strengthen the legal frameworks upon which the state can be able to navigate and also provide proper climate governance. And also the Nigerian government too have done their part at the federal level. They were able to establish the National Climate Change Policy and Response Strategy, which included going to geopolitical zones to engage in public hearing on NDC reports and updates, and so that they can get reactions from the local communities and use the NDC report as a tool to build community resilience. And for now, the whole of Nigeria is we've been acclimatized in terms of the climate change policy, and we are seeing what the federal government is doing to also support the subnational interests by expanding the scope of policy frameworks and to include most of the output strategies, the agreed conclusions and resolutions of the climate policy negotiations going on at the international level, especially at COP27 and previous COPs. So on that note, I believe that our role as local and regional and international actors should be to take the outcomes of some of these side events back home and share these reports with key policymakers in order to change the policy directions. Thank you.
Excellent. Dr. Hepzibah, are you simultaneously at national and international level, you are actually pushing forward to make sure climate governance and listening local communities. Now I'm handing over to Dr. Mary,
Thank
for
you.
question answer session.
Ezio Costa Cordello, the Executive Director of FEMA, has kindly agreed to take a few questions. I would like to invite our colleagues who were on the first panel to come up and join us, Ahmed and Mark and the others, so that they can answer any questions.
Anyway. Hello, thank you very much to all the organizers of this amazing event. I'm sure you are full of ideas and questions after hearing all the things that are going on around the world, all the innovations in governance, climate litigation, and transparency. We have 10 minutes for questions, so I will ask to those that want to ask questions to be very brief in their questions. 1 minute tops, please saying who they are, who are they directing the question, and which is the question. So we have 1 minute. Anyone that wants to ask something, they can raise your hand. We don't have questions. I will start because I have a question for Dr. Fabiano and where is Fabiano? I don't know. It's in the there he is. My question is, why are you not here? No, my question is about the network of lawyers in climate litigation in Latin America, and how do you connect yourselves with judges?
It's working? Okay. No, I can speak from here.
Yeah,
it's easier.
great.
Yeah. No, thank you very much for the question and interest. In fact, as I said, the network grew quite organically. So I think it was a matter of kickstarting it, and it really started to grow exponentially when we did the first capacity building course, and that built on all the networks and connections that members had. But the word spread very quickly. I think the fact that it was during the pandemic when the interest in virtual events also grew, and it made it possible for so many people to engage. But after that, as we started also to contribute to things like public debates and things like that, the interest from members of the judiciary and other bodies also grew. And it really speaks to the realization that all the legal community, from academics to practitioners to the judiciary, not only have a role to play, but also need to be capacitated and more integrated in this debate. I don't know if that answers your question, but it really was, amazingly for us, a very organic movement, and it shows, I guess, the interest that this area of law and the potential that it has, really.
Many thanks, Dr. Fabiano. We have a question down there. Felipe, if you can give her the microphone, please. Fabiano is taking it. Thank you. We're a collaborative bunch of people. That's good.
Thank you very much. My name is Nana Eshen. I work with Africa Finance Corporation, and it's a multilateral development financial institution set up by member countries. We have about 39 African countries, and we also have private sector shareholders. And the mandate is to develop the economies of African countries through proactively developing and financing infrastructure projects on the continent. So we finance, oil and gas. Well, I know that's not the best, in terms of this climate change. We also finance, roads, ports, transport infrastructure, heavy industry, power projects, we have wind farm projects, we have solar and others as well. Before I came here, we're looking to, we did some research on how climate change would affect the work that we do, financing these infrastructure projects. It was very difficult to find any legal framework. And I came here also looking around to see whether there was anything that could help us in the work that we do, ensuring that we are within the treaties, the rules. But I've found very little. So I just wondered whether there's any information that you could assist us with that will allow us to ensure that we have, we provide climate resilient infrastructure, for example, and also the legal framework that affects financing of such infrastructure and development of such infrastructure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, the question is not directed directly to anyone, but if someone has an idea about laws or legal frameworks governing infrastructure for resilience, I don't know, who wants to take the question? No one? Okay.
I'll start, but I think our colleague from the state level and also Runa might have some ideas. Because while I don't work as much in agriculture, I've seen changes in the land that are not reflected in the laws. And sometimes it can be heartbreaking. I really appreciate your question, because sometimes it can be heartbreaking when the law still refers to a river that has died, when the law still refers to a mountain site that has been clear-cut logged, and then the water has washed away the soil, when a law still refers to communities that can no longer survive and have dried up and blown away. And what we can do at least is try to change the ways that our laws interact with the reality on the ground for the people, and put in place mechanisms that allow people to inform and change the law as it is being felt on the ground. And many of those rules, many of those changes and systems to adapt and interact the law, rather than having it be a rule up there in the sky somewhere that nobody can change even when it's so wrong, many of those changes have existed already in the customary laws of our countries. In Canada, where I teach, we have the world's first JID. It's the Juris Indigenous Doctorate, and it's Indigenous law degree taught by Indigenous law professors. And this is one of the first principles that they teach. We graduated our first cohort of Indigenous lawyers in April, and it was a proud moment because we could see the law being forced to change as the Indigenous lawyers came forward and were ready to change it. And that degree is based on Indigenous principles and mechanisms. So this is just one idea that I've seen work in some places. Our colleague referred to some others, and she's here. But I'm hoping that Runa and possibly also our colleague from Nigeria, Dr. Suodo, might have other ideas that are even more to the point.
I think it's not only the question of laws, it's the question of implementation is actually happening of those laws. So a country like Bangladesh, and I'm sure many of the other countries, have got laws, but they're so far from being justly put into work. And there are, again, two other points. One is that when we try to pass something through this legal process, of course it takes time. And the person who is suffering today doesn't have that time. So we need to work on two fronts. We need to work on the process themselves in trying to get the legalities and rights for these and benefits for the communities and those who have suffered. But that must not stop from what is morally right and correct to do. So on one side, you can work towards that. One side, we need to continue our work, enforce it, because so much of the way that you work, and when that results in positivity, a kind of acceptance into the system takes place. And we have seen this happening over and over and over again. So much so that even sometimes we do ethical training for the police. You know, and that's not anything by law, but that's just by your own actions being strong enough to be able to put it on the table and be able to be accepted by the community and the people for whom you work.
There's a question in front.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Manzurul Khan. I'm from Bangladesh. The legally binding agreement, if you look at the whole UNFCCC process, is far away from the legally binding agreement. We tried and we failed. After Kyoto Protocol, we tried again for the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement is not a legally binding agreement though. The Paris Agreement is a kind of a gentleman agreement. You can be involved and you can be withdrawn anytime. No punishment, no responsibility, nothing. So for strengthening the legal tools and justice, in terms of, you are discussing about the loss and damage, we are discussing about the climate displaced, vulnerable people, we are discussing about the resilience enhancing, we are discussing about the governance, disaster. I would like to request to this distinguished panel and the organizations to develop something on the legally binding issues, particularly on the disasters, resilience, and loss and damage issue. You don't need actually the word liabilities or compensation. If you have the legally binding agreement or legally binding things in your hand, you don't need to repeat those words anymore. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Maybe Mumita Dasgupta can take the answer very shortly, and Dr. Sodo as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Dr. Sodo.
Yeah, thank you very much. Regarding the question from the delegate from the African Finance Corporation, you are looking for access to information on instruments, legally binding instruments and agreements within the context of Africa. And I think recently there were developments. Last year, President Marcel from Senegal, the chairperson of the African Union, held a program to address the Francophone climate justice. And they began with forest conservation. So, and that collaboration was done with France. So they had what they call the Paris Initiative for Conservation of Central African Forests. And as a participant of that event, I felt that all the agreements within the countries within the Francophone region in Africa, there was a proposal for legal binding instruments to conserve all of Central African forests. And we proposed that this same initiative should come to West Africa because from Bayelsa State, on a subnational basis, we had what we call forest reserves, but the federal government doesn't take the conservation of our federal forest reserve seriously. So there's an existing law in the state that if the federal government fails to do so, the state can take over those forest reserves. And so the issue of law becomes sacrosanct so that climate change should not happen to our forests because based on the UN RED program initiative for transparency and due diligence in forest management, we are trying to operationalize those mechanisms even at the subnational level. And we have lots of UN RED program, DEX office, we just opened it in Bayelsa State and ensure that we can drive sustainability to our forests, land-based ecosystems, and also initiate some of the solutions, nature-based solutions, just like climate-smart agriculture, because we no longer have arable lands for agriculture because of flooding. You know, so we are looking for sustainable ways to grow food and other issues. So all these things are contained in the resolutions of some of these international, or at the original level rather, like the Paris Initiative for Conservation of Africa's environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we will take then the last answer. This was the last question. I'm sorry, we don't have any more time. Professor Dasgupta, and then we will pass to Dr. Casillas Madhu.
Thank you. I'm an advocate, not professor. Okay. It's from my senior's idea that all the developing countries can take the same measures like Bangladesh, that for establishing a national mechanism to attract the international support. And if all the vulnerable countries can do that, it can put a pressure to the international community as well. Thank you.
That was excellent, and thank you especially for being brief but clear. We'd like to ask Dr. Ahmed Khalifa, our co-host, if he could just give a couple of words to close this session, and with all of our thanks for being here in Egypt to receive us, and for the incredible work that he did in the Cairo conference that preceded this. If we can give him the microphone. He was expecting a question rather than an honorary closing.
No, I was expecting to leave. Well, it was a great honor, and I was just telling Dr. Fabiano that being part of the COP, having it in Egypt and maybe in other countries that are not very much concerned in its public debate, is a great opportunity to raise awareness, to gain new people who are concerned, who are aware of the importance of the case, and to gain more people who can be working for climate justice. We are totally running of time, but I think that such roundtables, such an example of a roundtable where we took 1 hour and a half and we're doing 3 conferences actually with the discussion, engagement, different institutions, tackling the question of climate change from different perspectives and from different national institutions is the key to the discussion, and the discussion is the key to any compromise that we need all to find, because there is no clear-cut solutions and there is no one equation that would fit for all, and we just have to continue working and continue hoping this is all what we can do. Thank you very much for our chairs, for our speakers, for the institutions that allowed me and my colleagues to be here and talking to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and I hope that we can stay in the room in order to do a photograph right afterward. I want to also thank Ezio for chairing the Q&A, and I'd like to call up 2 students who have a brief presentation to make, the results of Climate Law and Justice Day. And in particular, of course, we applauded them at the beginning. That is Antoinette and Maeve. So Antoinette Nestor, Dr. Antoinette Nestor is a postdoctoral fellow in the University of Cambridge. And Maeve McDermott is a master's and now law student as well, who is a researcher with the Center for International Sustainable Development Law, and also, of course, one of the coordinators of the Climate Law and Governance Initiative. So they will play a video that has come from some youth filmmakers for 2 minutes, and then they will come straight to the podium to give a final presentation that closes this session with Gianciella. Thank you. Okay, we will go straight to the presentation, because I know that we were lucky even to manage 2 videos that actually worked, and I've been in this room when others haven't. So please, if Maeve and Antoinette would be willing to, in just a very brief closing presentation, tell us about the results of the day and celebrate the winners of the awards. Thank you. Do we have the microphone that is walking around? Because the one on the podium has just attacked one of our students.
Can you hear me? Okay. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. With more than 169 country parties to the Paris Agreement prioritizing legal and institutional reforms in their nationally determined contributions, climate law and governance is crucial to mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. However, only 12 of the top law schools and law programs surveyed in a pilot study of common law English-speaking countries offered courses specifically focused on climate change law and governance. The overwhelming call for climate-related legal and institutional reforms from country parties, coupled with the lack of lawyers trained in climate law, indicates a growing need to scale up capacity for legal reform. To scale up climate law and governance capacity, the Climate Law and Governance Initiative, together with its partners, hosted multiple events throughout COP27. On Friday, November 11th, over 1,400 registrants joined us from around the world for this year's Climate Law and Governance Day, 2022, which focused on implementing climate commitments through policy, law, and practice, and which was held online and co-hosted by partners from the University of Cambridge and Ain Shams University in Cairo, Egypt, together with the International Law Association, the International Bar Association, and the Center for International Sustainable Development Law, as well as the African Union Commission on International Law. CLGD 2022 featured a grand opening, 3 high-level plenaries, and 16 substantive expert sessions addressing a wide range of pressing climate law and governance challenges and solutions, and more than 100 distinguished legal leaders and experts shared their knowledge and expertise throughout the day. During this year's CLGD 2022, advocates from various bar associations and law societies issued a challenge to law associations to develop guidance to expand education on climate law and governance among law associations throughout the world and to conduct outreach on these issues by next year's COP. This challenge has already been accepted by representatives from multiple bar associations. Other CLGI partners announced and celebrated the release of toolkits that will strengthen climate law and governance and will advance its implementation on both international and national levels. These toolkits include the Center for Climate Engagement at Hughes Hall University of Cambridge's new Law and Climate Atlas, the Sabin Center's new AI-powered Global Climate Law and Policy Database, the Commonwealth Secretariat's Law and Climate Change Toolkit, and the Commonwealth Secretariat's Small Island Developing States Clean Energy Toolkit, developed in partnership with Sustainable Energy for All. The Center for International Sustainable Development Law also announced the publication of 5 new legal experts' reports on EU America's trade and climate law. During the event, CLGI partners also committed to democratize climate law and education for sustainability by committing to create a massive open online course on climate law and governance in partnership with 20 esteemed universities from around the world to fill the gap that currently exists in climate law and governance course offerings in law schools and law programs. To train a new generation of climate specialists worldwide capable of advancing climate law and governance and advocating for implementation, the Climate Law and Governance Initiative hosted a climate law and governance specialization course on November 13th. More than 400 learners registered for this year's online course. The course covered a foundational understanding of the Paris Agreement under the UNFCCC and sessions on law, governance, and climate mitigation, climate law and governance on adaptation, loss, and damage, and climate law and governance on finance, compliance, and transparency. 3 breakout sessions allowed participants to share country experiences and analyze climate law and policy approaches with colleagues from around the world. The participants who successfully passed the post-course assessment will receive a climate law and governance certification and will join a global registry, which Dr. Antoinette Nestor will discuss next. Antoinette, all yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you very much. A bit of multitasking here. So yes, as you can see on the slide, is the Climate Pledge Registry. And basically, the registry stems from a pledge that was made at COP26 in Glasgow to increase climate law and governance capacity and community worldwide, going from 600 to 6,000 legal specialists by 2024. And we want to support and promote the Paris Agreement, and there are not enough legal specialists, basically, if you look around training that is needed. So we want to include also the SDGs, and we need to have more legal specialists. So if you can actually go to the slide, you also can tap the QR code or go to the website and sign the registry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Antoinette and Maeve. As you know, there are 169 nationally determined contributions out of 188, which are depending on legal and institutional reform in order to be able to achieve their targets. And yet, we don't have enough legal specialists to help them. So going from 600 to 6,000 in 2 years is a stretch target, but it's a very necessary one. Fortunately, Fabiano and the Legal Specialist Group have gathered the first 600. We now need to scale that up to 6,000. And all of us here in the room, if you work on law and governance or you're studying it, please do register on the registry and encourage everyone in your countries to do so as well. Thank you. I will now turn to our closing speaker, Licenciada Gianella Guillén Fernández, who's an especialista from Derecho Ambiente y Recursos Naturales, DAR, which has been an incredibly patient and wonderful partner in this initiative and have brought forward many wonderful ideas. So we're very happy that she can help us to close this event. And depending on the time that we are given, if Advocate Felipe Pino, who's a project coordinator with FEMA, can also come up, he would be very welcome to say the last few words as we close.
Thank you very much for the organizations. Well, thank you very much also to the panelists for the intervention. Without a doubt, they leave us enriching and key ideas regarding a crucial issue such as the implementation of the principle of climate justice in the decisions made in this context of the Conference of Parties of Climate Change, as well as in the policies and strategies to level of each state to promote concrete actions that address the inequalities in the conditions to face climate change. Also, it is true, this approach to climate justice is beginning to be more visible. We see that it continues to represent a challenge but also opportunity in the most vulnerable regions to promote legal tools and capacities that allow landing and implementing decisions that guarantee the protections of the people and ecosystems most vulnerable to the impacts of the climate change. Given this, it's important to continue demanding compliance with the financing commitment from the most developed countries to the most vulnerable countries. Let us remember that worldwide, only a few countries are the ones that concentrate the greatest amount of greenhouse gas emissions. On the contrary, countries like ours that demand climate justice are the ones that contribute the least to climate change, but the ones that suffer the most its consequences and effects. And it is that the issue of climate financing is a key part for the implementation of nationally determined contributions in the least developed countries, transform their economies towards low carbon emissions, and also to support paying the damage and losses derived from the climate impacts. Currently today, this obligation of developed countries has not been fully complied with. Some reports in the case of Latin America and the Caribbean indicated that of the total climate financing mobilized in previous years, only 17 came to our region, and partly through the law mechanisms, which ultimately further in-depths our countries and is promoting that we are the ones who pay to adapt for the impacts that others are flourishing. Improvements in climate finances must consider a climate justice approach as well. In relation to this, and given the existing inequalities to face this global problem, it's necessary to demand that climate justice is always present at the center of the decision of global warming and the climate crisis. It is vital to give a voice to the people most affected by climate change, transform the idea of development and economic growth in countries, invest in solutions that respond to current and future climate impacts, and promote accountability of our leaders in order to guarantee the actions and climate improvements that reach the countries are used in a pertinent manner and with the emphasis on reducing the effects of the most vulnerable populations. Thank you.
Thank you, Gianella, and thank to all the people that is still here. I know that we have been some time, and I will be brief, but I just wanted to take a moment to thank all the professors in both panels. I really wanted to thank you, to dedicate your time and your lives to the study of climate law and environmental law, and not only to study it, but to teach it after to the new generations. I think I speak for the students and the lawyers and the advocates that are here when I say that climate law and environmental law really give us a purpose in the sustainability of life. It really makes a point of what we are trying to do, that is bring justice to the more people possible. And just wanted to keep you with a reflection about that it is not always necessary to create new laws to protect rights, because what we really need is that new people use the existence laws in new cases in the most original and effective way that they can. We are not necessarily have to make indigenous law if we want to protect indigenous people. We don't want to. We don't have to necessarily give rights to a river to protect them. We will do as hard as we can. We will do all that we can, and I know that all that are in this chair today with us have the same goals. It's always stimulating to think this with lawyers. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank you all the time for being here and all the time that you are putting in this scope and these events, and of course in all of your countries, to protect human rights and environmental rights. Thank you.